Donald Trump defends his tariff plan in an interview against the teachings of contemporary economics one day after turning a rally into a music seance, which we've never seen in the modern political era. It's been weeks since Hurricane Helene. We'll have a report from the muck and the rubble. We'll also have another useful lesson in misinformation hygiene, this time how to spot fake disaster photographs, plus an update on the Middle East, a study on climate migration, and why Google is turning to nuclear power to power artificial intelligence. And finally, an essay with some local news about this show. The Daily Report starts in a moment. Hello, thank you for joining us. We begin our report exactly 3 weeks until Election Day. Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump held dueling events in the key battleground state of Pennsylvania Monday. But their events, held at opposite ends of the state, were separated by more than distance. One was a campaign rally, and one became a kind of musical performance art.
Under my economic plan, and by the way, so dude wants to talk about his plans, which really are about cutting taxes for the richest people. Please do check out the Wall Street Journal or Goldman Sachs or the 16 Nobel laureates or Moody's, who have all analyzed the plans and said mine will strengthen the economy, his will make it weaker.
Well, you had said you wanted to close with a specific song.
Okay, let's do a couple of
two more fast questions.
So, Justin, how about a couple of really beauties, and we'll sit down, relax.
Back on the campaign trail today, Trump spoke with the editor-in-chief of Bloomberg at the Economic Club of Chicago, insisting that his tariff plan would cause no economic disruption or increase prices, as economists predict, even though Trump promises to essentially end trade with China, place at least 10% tariffs on European nations, and affect 40 million jobs in America that rely on trade.
My question was about your allies, not about China. You are going to annoy the people you need to rally behind you.
But our allies have taken advantage of us more so than our enemies. Our allies are the European Union. We have a trade deficit of $300 billion with the European Union.
On the Democratic side, Harris continued her campaign blitz targeting black male voters with an interview on the radio show The Breakfast Club, hosted by Charlamagne the God, which boasts about 8 million regular listeners.
One thing they've been saying, a lot of your press hits get criticized. Folks say you come off as very scripted. They say you like to stick to your talking points. And some media says you have...
That would be called disciplined.
Ooh, okay. Speak to that.
But go on. The reality is that there are certain things that must be repeated to ensure that I have everyone know what I stand for and the issues that I think are at stake in this election.
And Tuesday, early voting kicked off in Georgia. According to the Secretary of State, more than 250,000 votes were cast on day one. That number easily surpassed the previous record of 136,000 in 2020. CBS News Chief Washington Correspondent Major Garrett joins me now. Major, 3 weeks out from the election, what does it say that the vice president is having to work so hard to court black men who should be solidly in the Democratic camp?
A couple of ways to look at that, John, at least two, maybe three. One is the black vote is no longer monolithic in this country, and that's a good thing. It's an evolving political dynamic in which black male voters look at parties differently than they might have taking cues from their grandfathers or fathers. That would be the evolutionary, things are going well part of the equation. The other way to look at it is there is still an invisible bar that a woman seeking the presidency of the United States cannot cross because she doesn't know how high it is, and that there is embedded sexism that can always work to the net detriment of any woman seeking the highest office in the land, and this is just the latest, most visible representation of it. There's a third way to look at it, based on my conversations, John, today with no fewer than half a dozen Democratic operatives deeply involved in this campaign, which is there is polling indications that there is some softness for the Harris campaign among African-American men. But 4 of the 6 Democratic operatives I talked to today asked me this question. Do you really believe Kamala Harris, the first African-American woman seeking the presidency, is running 10 points behind Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden among African-American men. They don't believe that data. They believe it's much closer, and they believe that this effort on Harris's part is to make sure that in the end, when all the votes are counted, African-American men support Harris at just about the same numbers they did President Biden and Hillary Clinton.
All right, staying on this account, Harris is going on Fox tomorrow. What do you make of that decision?
When I covered the 2008 campaign of Democratic nominee Barack Obama, he went out of his way to talk to the Fox audience. I ought to know. I worked at Fox at that time because the campaign made a strategic decision that it was important to talk to that part of America. The Fox audience may be more estranged from the Democratic messaging than it was in 2008, but it's still worth the effort. One way to say that you are doing your best to reach all Americans is to go on Fox. It also sends a message, which the Harris campaign has felt it needs to be responsive to, that she's afraid of certain venues. She wants to provide at least some counter-narrative that she'll go anywhere, even if it's a perceived hostile environment, to communicate her message.
You've been to a lot of Trump rallies over the years. What do you make of the 39-minute dance experience?
That it needs some context. First of all, one person fainted. That sort of slowed things down, and that was a real medical situation. It required a stretcher to take the particular person out. Then a second person fainted. And I talked to people who were in the advance team with Trump about the event, and that really sort of deadened the entire atmosphere. And Trump really didn't know what to do, decided that he didn't want to take any more questions, that the entire feeling of the room had sort of been, if not paralyzed, is certainly subdued dramatically by these two fainting episodes. He did have this one thing that he said that made no sense whatsoever. Does anyone else want to faint? Raise your hand. Maybe that was a joke. I don't know. It didn't land very well. And then the idea of listening to music and just watching people look adoringly at Trump, I would say that's just not that much of a variation from other rallies, except he wasn't speaking this time.
And finally, recently Trump spoke about using the military against what he called the enemy within, which may have even included Congressman Adam Schiff in that description of his. Former President Trump's former Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper, told CNN's Caitlin Collins, "I think we should take those words seriously." And former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, who served under Trump, told Bob Woodward that Trump is fascist to the core. We've never seen anything like this. Former senior officials on the most important question making these kind of claims. What are your thoughts?
That this issue is not going to go away, nor should it, John. Former President Trump just didn't say something about people who have entered our country without documentation illegally, as he would say, which is a serious policy question. He was talking about Americans who disagree with him politically constituting an enemy from within that should have, at least theoretically, a presidential power to pursue them, either with the National Guard or the U.S. military. Let me say that again. American citizens who disagree with Trump politically constitute an enemy from within that could, under certain circumstances, be pursued by the National Guard or the military. Even if you think that is just extravagant Trump rhetoric, it's extravagance of a kind that is deeply concerning, serious, and possibly highly dangerous. This will be not the last we hear of this particular phrase, because I guarantee you Democrats are going to repeat it over and over and over and try to ask Trump the central question. What do you mean by this?
Chief Washington Correspondent Major Garrett from Washington. Thanks as always, Major.
Sure.
Now over to North Carolina, where at least 92 people remain unaccounted for, and it's been nearly 3 weeks since Hurricane Helene swept through the state. Governor Roy Cooper said Tuesday that a task force has been formed to help track those missing. Meanwhile, to the unforced errors caused by misinformation. FEMA staff in North Carolina have resumed normal operations and outreach after it received threats over the weekend. Officials say the man who made the threats was arrested. The state's governor addressed the threats FEMA received on Tuesday, urging those who were making them, as well as those who were spreading misinformation on the storm, to stop. In Tennessee, the family of one of the victims killed at work during flooding from Hurricane Helene is suing his employer. Relatives of Johnny Peterson have filed a $25 million wrongful death lawsuit against Impact's Plastics Factory. They claim the company forced workers to stay at the plant when the storm was hitting, even as conditions got worse. In total, 5 employees were killed and 1 remains missing. And across Florida, some residents are beginning to see the scope of the damage left behind by Hurricane Milton. in Manasata Key, a small community of Florida's west coast. The town looks more like ruins. Only some parts reopened to some residents and businesses on Tuesday. Those who have returned have been warned to exercise extreme caution as they go through the debris. CBS News' Dave Malkoff is there to give us a closer look at some of the devastation.
Hi there, John. We are nearly a week and exactly 27 miles from where Milton made landfall just down the beach here. But it's important to keep your eye on neighborhoods like this in Manasota Key because this storm may have come in yesterday. If you look at the damage here, look at this giant tree that came down and crushed that house. But I want to point your attention to these rocks here. The neighbors in this neighborhood tell me that these rocks were covered in sand until about 2 years ago when another hurricane came through and wiped that sand away. This was supposed to be what would break the waves as the storm surge comes off the ocean and pushes towards the homes. It may have done that, but what it did was break the houses as well. If you look back there, you can see some of these rocks came loose in the pushing power of the storm surge and went right into the houses and broke the facade of the homes apart, killing the structure and the superstructure around the homes and the roofs. And there were some buildings back here that have been here since the 40s. So that was way before Hurricane Andrew in 1992 that changed all of the building codes throughout the state of Florida, making them more hurricane hardy. And since that year, we have had better and better codes in the state of Florida. But these homes are, as you can see, pre-Andrew homes. For these homes to be damaged like this, it takes not just the pushing power of the water, but also the wind. In this storm, you had 120-mile-an-hour sustained winds, and you also had 180-mile-an-hour gusts. It's going to take some time to clean up these neighborhoods from the sand, the debris, and putting whatever back they can as they try to put their lives back together, John.
Dave Malkoff, thank you. Now to the broader weather. Across the Midwest and eastern United States, a fall chill is settling in. For more, here's meteorologist Mike Bettis from our partners at the Weather Channel.
Well, some chilly fall air has moved into the Northeast, even pushing its way down into our southern states as well, all because of a jet stream dip that's right in here. You can see where that low pressure sits north of Maine here, but it really brings down in some cold temperatures for us here around the Great Lakes. In fact, places like Kansas City could see their first freeze come tomorrow morning. 30s from Detroit to Indianapolis, Nashville, and maybe even flirting with the 30s there as far south as, say, North Georgia. You take a look at the numbers tomorrow. Very seasonal this time of year, 50s and 60s, although now on the cool side, we were just in the 90s in Dallas, 68 for a high on Wednesday, and 67 in Jackson, Mississippi. To the west we go. Cold air's finally moved in here, and snow in all the peaks here, including as much as a foot of snow in locations across Utah. But we're still in hurricane season. Two entities to watch: Invest 94L, a disturbed area of thunderstorms through the Caribbean. High pressure is going to keep everything to the south, so no immediate threat to U.S. mainland here. But over the course of time, especially late in the week, some threats to the islands and Central America. And at the very latest, you can check us out on the Weather Channel, also on your favorite TV streaming device.
Mike Bettis, thank you. Coming up, the United States' new warning to Israel: fix the humanitarian situation in Gaza or military aid will be cut off. More on that ahead. Plus, tech companies need robust sources of energy to power artificial intelligence. Google is turning to nuclear power. You're streaming The Daily Report.
These are the stories
1, 2, 3, go!
Of we, the people.
We're trying to generate our own hope.
It's a huge deal.
I'm enabling them to feel valued.
Eye on America. Weeknights on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I use sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm
choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good. Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail.
What do you say to those in your party? Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides. Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
Exclusively on CBS News 24/7, the streaming home of CBS News.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin are warning that the United States may withhold military aid to Israel if it does not improve the humanitarian situation in Gaza in the next 30 days. This comes as the Israeli military escalates its attacks across the Gaza Strip, focusing mainly on the northern city of Jabalia. At least 50 Palestinians were killed on Tuesday alone. For more, I want to bring in Seth Jones. He's the president of the Defense and Security Department and Harold Brown Chair at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Seth, thanks for being with us on Monday. The United States said it would...
Thank you very much.
On Monday, the United States said it would send anti-missile systems and troops to Israel. On Tuesday, Secretaries Blinken and Austin, as we've been reporting, said military aid to Israel might be paused or if the humanitarian situation in Gaza doesn't improve. Help us understand those two, if they're in conflict or if they represent two different tracks. How do you read that?
Well, I don't think they're necessarily in conflict right now. Where the Israelis have big challenges, we saw them with the last range of ballistic missiles that Iran fired against Israel, some of which penetrated Israeli air defenses and also hit targets, including Israeli bases. They need help with air defense, air and missile defense. They do have Arrow, Iron Dome, David Sling, but that is not enough when the Iranians and Iranian partners have a lot of standoff weapons they can shoot from Iran, as well as Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and other countries. So the THAAD battery that the U.S. Deployed to Israel will be really helpful here. The munitions the U.S. has provided will be helpful. At the same time, the U.S. is also signaling to the Israelis that they need to increase their humanitarian aid packages to Gaza, or they risk unspecified, and that's important, unspecified amounts of future military aid.
That's exactly the unspecified nature of it. I mean, is there a way in which, I mean, if the U.S. were to withhold military aid, the devil's in the details, right? I mean, they could do a symbolic thing, or they could really hurt the Israeli effort. Is that a way to think about it?
Yeah, I suspect at this point with the standoff missile and drone threat, rockets and others coming from the region targeting Israel, the U.S. is not going to withhold defensive systems like air defense systems like the THAAD, which was just deployed. What they might do, and has been discussed in the past, is withhold for some period of time large diameter bombs that the Israelis have used to strike targets in Gaza, like 2,000-pound bombs that have killed civilians in Gaza. Those offensive weapons are ones that they might withhold for some period of time. But I don't think it would be a blanket withholding, and I certainly don't think it would be a withholding of defensive aid.
Finally, the conflict with Iran and Hezbollah. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office said Tuesday that Israel's national interests will determine their retaliation against Iran, not their interests with respect to the United States. How do you read that, and how does that help you understand what Israel might do in retaliation, which everybody expects, against Iran?
Well, I think it's also important that the Israelis have publicly noted that they're, at this point, not going to hit nuclear targets and some of the oil and gas targets. I mean, I think at the end of the day, this is Netanyahu signaling that he's going to do everything to protect his own domestic population. They're not going to, they're not going to be stopped by the U.S. or anyone else to protect Israel's security. This is, after all, from an Israeli perspective, the country's survival is at stake after October 7th of last year. What I think it does mean is, and I think it's important, that Iran has now launched 2 different salvos of missiles and drones and other standoff weapons against Israel directly, as opposed to partners. So I think Israel is going to plan to strike a range of targets, military bases, command and control facilities, but they've just signaled it's not going to be nuclear targets and probably not some of the economic infrastructure. But I think they feel very strongly that they've got to hit back hard, because this is now the second time they've been directly hit from the Iranians.
Seth Jones with the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Thanks, as always, Seth.
Thank you very much.
Survivors and families of victims of last year's deadly mass shooting in Lewiston, Maine, are threatening to sue the military. 18 people were killed and more than a dozen others injured when Robert Card opened fire at a bar and bowling alley in October 2023. Card, who was an Army reservist, was found dead days after the shooting from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Lawyers representing more than 100 people affected by the shooting claim the Army knew about the shooter's mental health issues and they could have stopped him. More than 800 service members who were kicked out of the military under the controversial Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy will receive honorable discharges. The Defense Department estimates more than 1,300 military members were dismissed from service due to their gender identity or sexual orientation under the policy. Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed in 2011, but CBS News has spoken to several veterans still suffering the consequences of having a dishonorable discharge. Tuesday's announcement comes a year after the Pentagon began reviewing the records of LGBTQ+ veterans. Former service members affected by the change will see their discharge papers automatically changed to honorable without having to go through the formal application process. The change will allow them to access several new benefits, including upgraded health care coverage, college tuition assistance, access to the VA loan programs, and job opportunities. Last fall, the National Zoo in Washington, D.C. said goodbye to its giant pandas on loan from China. If you found that news unbearable, you can now relax. 2 new 3-year-old giant pandas arrived at the zoo Tuesday. Their names are Bao Li and Qingbao. The National Zoo first received pandas from China in 1972 in an effort to open diplomatic relations between the nations. The last pair came in 2000. They were supposed to stay 10 years, but the deal was extended several times. So when the pandas and their cub went back to China in 2023, some believed Beijing was pulling the bears from the U.S. zoos as geopolitical relations shifted. But the new pandas now will make their official debut in January after spending some time in quarantine. Still to come, Walgreens is set to shut down more than 1,000 stores across the United States. We'll explain what's behind the pharmacy giant's decision. You're streaming The Daily Report.
On On Face the Nation, we try to have an informed conversation about the essential issues of the day. The way to learn is to listen to the answers and to ask follow-up questions.
Why did you miss the moment?
I'm not sure why they missed the moment.
Listening to how someone explains themselves is so key to understanding their perspective. And that's why the face-to-face ones we have on Face the Nation are so important.
On America, weeknights on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Let's do it! Let's go! Let's do this! I can see clearly now that the rain is gone. Superstar approaching, superstar approaching.
Just get your popcorn and get ready.
Come on, Julia. Oh, no. I will if you will. You go, gal. Yeah, boy! Yeah.
Dollar Jill.
If you can't get into the market, it's okay. Renting is fine.
Box, oh, it's bad. Screw cap, oh, it's bad. It's not true.
We are making a wonderful lemony chicken.
Ooh, it's hot.
That's good.
I wonder what Serena's doing. I wonder how Serena is feeling.
That's a really good question. No one's asked me that yet.
You're 70 years old? 70, yeah. I'm 21.
We'll see you 7 o'clock sharp.
When you need your sports news all the time,
We've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you.
Big news coming out of the NFL. A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
With highlights.
What a finish at the final round of play.
And in-depth analysis.
Can they three-peat? Tony Romo joins the conversation.
What can you say about this game?
When you need your sports in a snap,
We're bringing you that breaking news right here on HQ.
find it on CBS Sports HQ. Streaming free anywhere you are.
The CBS News original 60 Minutes opens its archives.
Pretty loose for a Friday night.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not my first show.
With moments you haven't heard before.
It's almost more fun that way when you have something to prove.
Listen to 60 Minutes, a second look, wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to the Daily Report. I'm John Dickerson. Here are some additions to our top stories. Judge in Georgia has ruled that local election officials must certify results by the Monday after Election Day, the deadline set by law. The decision comes after a Republican member of the Fulton County's election board asked the court to have discretion to decline to certify results if they are concerned about the process. The U.S. and the Philippines launched large-scale joint military exercises Tuesday, just one day after China conducted war games around Taiwan in retaliation for the Taiwanese president's pro-independence comments. The drills took place in areas facing both Taiwan and the South China Sea, involving more than 2,000 troops. The U.S. Agriculture Department has launched an internal investigation into the agency's handling of the deadly boar's head listeria outbreak. Senator Richard Blumenthal first demanded the inquiry. It'll look into why a Virginia deli meat processing plant was allowed to continue operating after federal and state inspectors found dozens of food safety rule violations and reported, quote, disturbing conditions at the plant. At least 10 people have died and nearly 60 others in 19 states have been sickened after a listeria strain was traced back to that facility. Google is turning to nuclear energy to keep up with the demands of artificial intelligence. The company announced a deal Monday with energy startup Kairos Power to purchase electricity from 7 small modular nuclear reactors, which still need to be built. The first of those reactors would come online in 2030. They'll be used to power Google's data centers, which process huge amounts of digital information, but they require a lot of energy to do so. A recent study found that by 2026, data centers across the globe will consume more than 1,000 terawatt hours of electricity, which means what? Well, that's about the same amount as the entire nation of Japan. Hank Jenkins Smith joins me now. He's a professor of public policy at the University of Oklahoma. Thanks so much for being with us. First question, why do data centers require so much power?
Data centers use, of course, servers. Servers are made up of a variety of different components, chiefly CPUs or processing units, graphic processing units, and RAM energy. All these are really dense components that fill those boxes that you can see on the screen there. Those boxes then have extremely rapidly moving electrons moving through them, handling many, many computations. Data being moved in, data being managed, data being processed. And so that process generates a lot of resistance. The resistance in those components generates heat that bleeds off into the unit. And you've felt that with your phone or your laptop when they get hot because of the heat bleeding off of the operations of those CPUs. So what happens then is this excess heat needs to be carried off. So it's taken out through various kinds of cooling systems. Those take a lot of electricity. And remember, there's thousands of those CPU or those processors within any given data center. Each data center uses about the same amount of electricity. I guess typically someplace between 5,000 and 20,000 households worth of electricity being running through there at a given time. And that needs to be running 24/7. Yeah. They can't afford for the power to break down because heat would build up. It would cause blackouts and loss of that processing power. And they run 24/7. So it's quite an enterprise. It takes a lot of electricity to run those units.
I love that description. Okay, you can help me understand something else, which is what is a small modular nuclear reactor? Is this something I could have in the backyard?
Not quite. Like a traditional nuclear reactor, a small modular reactor, or an SMR, as they're often referred to, uses a radioactive source to generate heat that produces steam that runs a generator that creates electricity. The difference is an SMR is a fraction of the size of a traditional reactor. These are typically built or they plan to build these things within a factory rather than on site. So they move the reactors themselves into the facility on the site, and the facility can be below ground. But the advantage of the factory construction is they have a lot of control over the quality of the construction, the reliability of the system, the safety of the system. Many of these reactors also run at much lower pressure than is the case with traditional reactors. So you don't have those high pressure vessels that have to sustain a lot of heat and corrosion. And they are typically referred to as fail-safe. They don't break down. They don't need humans to intervene to keep them going.
And last question, does fail-safe mean they are safe? And if so, do you expect more companies are going to turn to these kinds of operations?
Well, we don't have a whole lot of data on how safe they are because they're new. Like any new technology, they have features that are designed to have enormous advantages, and most of the consensus is that these are going to be serious advantages. It's a smaller source term, so there's less radioactivity to throw around, less pressure, more capability to maintain these systems. They basically can load them on the back of a truck and the components and haul them back to the factory for cleaning out. But when we get more experience with these things, we'll have a better idea for how safe they really are. As to will they be used, there's an awful lot of movement toward using SMRs, not just with Google, but with Microsoft, with Amazon, and a variety of other entities that are really thinking seriously about shifting to nuclear power and SMRs in particular.
Professor Hank Jenkins Smith with the University of Oklahoma. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome, John.
Now to a digest of some foreign stories. Canada has expelled India's top diplomat and named him as a person of interest in the assassination of a Sikh activist on Canadian soil. Canada also expelled 5 other Indian diplomats. Last year, Canada's prime minister said there was evidence linking India to the killing of a prominent activist and Canadian citizen who had been calling for an independent Sikh state. India denies involvement in his death and expelled 6 Canadian diplomats in response. South Korea's military says North Korea has blown up parts of a road and railway connecting the two countries. The routes are no longer in use, and the incident is largely seen as symbolic. In response to the explosion, South Korea says it has bolstered its readiness and surveillance at the border. Earlier this year, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un said he was no longer interested in reconciliation with South Korea. A section of Hong Kong's oldest zoo has been sealed off after 9 monkeys died in 2 days. Hong Kong's leaders said Tuesday a team of experts has been brought in to test the animals. He said the monkeys were acting unusual, but it's still unclear what led to their deaths. 3 of the dead monkeys were cotton-top tamarins, which are considered critically endangered. Walgreens will be shutting down 1,200 stores over the next 3 years. The pharmacy chain says the closures will begin in 2025 with 500 locations affected. Walgreens has struggled to keep up with online competitors, and it's also seen a decline in consumer spending. Those are issues that have affected other chains like Rite Aid and CVS as well, with the latter cutting nearly 3,000 jobs earlier this month to save money. Walgreens in June had already announced plans to shut down 300 underperforming stores as a part of an internal reshuffling plan. The company's shares were up nearly 16% Tuesday on all this news. However, the stock is down about 60% for the year. Still to come, why extreme weather is causing a spike in climate migration. We'll tell you which parts of the country are most affected. You're streaming the Daily Report.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail. What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides on CBS News 24/7.
Stream our expanded 1-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7. That is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable. The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this?
Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
As the southern United States reels from back-to-back hurricanes, researchers estimate that millions of Americans will move away from areas with extreme weather in the coming decades. According to a study from the First Street Foundation, roughly 3.2 million Americans have already moved away from high-risk flood zones between 2000 and 2020. Researchers estimate that 7.5 million more will relocate from high-flood areas in the next 30 years. That doesn't take into account the mass amount of people also moving due to heat, drought, and wildfires. Alex Desherbinen joins us now. He's the director and senior scientist at the Center for Integrated Earth Systems Information at Columbia's Climate School. Alex, thanks for joining us. Which areas of the country are seeing the most people moving out as a result of climate migration?
Hi, John. Thanks. Yeah, the regions that are probably most affected right now are places like Florida, Texas, the Carolinas, California, where coastal flooding, sea level rise, and massive hurricanes are really impacting the populations there. We've seen, obviously, multiple hurricanes in recent days. Also, wildfires are having a huge impact in places like California and the Pacific Northwest. I would say that despite what the First Street Foundation found, that if you look at the actual data for the censuses between, say, 2010 and 2020, a lot of these areas are still seeing a lot of growth, population growth. That means people are moving into them. And for that, we have to ask the question, why are people, in many cases, voting with their feet and moving into areas of high risk? And that has a lot to do with insurance rates and politics. Basically, insurance rates have been kept artificially low in most states. Many large insurers are exiting high-risk markets. So to keep the market's insurance affordable for the home buyer, for homeowners, states provide plans of last resort. And often it's covered by undercapitalized local insurers who fill the void and quickly go bankrupt when disasters strike. So the taxpayers end up footing the bill for a lot of these problems. But essentially, if you're asking what happens when disaster strikes, if someone sees their house destroyed multiple times, flooding occurring, there is increasing anecdotal evidence to suggest that people are, either intending to migrate, they're considering what the risks are in the future, or, ready to receive that insurance payout or possibly a home buyout and move out of the area.
Alex, does that change the composition of a place like Florida? So in other words, if some are moving out but some are moving in, is there a difference in does that change? Are they older, younger? How does it change the population within the state now?
Yeah, so typically younger, more able-bodied people leave areas that are climate affected. So the research definitely confirms that's the case. And so what you see is generally perhaps poorer or more high-risk elderly populations remaining in areas that are at high flood risk. So there are demographic changes that are occurring.
So it sounds like in a place like Florida, you've got older, higher risk people, and the insurance regime you just described sounds really fragile and dangerous, or fragile at least.
Yeah, so there's a real risk that many poor Americans are going to be trapped in areas because they can't sell their homes. So remember that for anyone who wants to buy a home, they need to get a mortgage first, and to get a mortgage, you need insurance. If the major insurers pull out or rates become too high, it could cause many in high-risk areas to have what we call stranded assets. That means that they will not be able to sell their homes. So this could be a real issue for the future.
Alex Desherbinen from Columbia's Climate School. Thank you so much.
Thank you, John.
We've seen dramatic, real, and unbelievable images arise from Hurricanes Helene and Milton. It's a breaking news situation where a lot of information is spreading quickly, but mixed in with the real is a wave of AI-generated images that could confuse and mislead us. CBS News confirmed producer Alex Clark explains how you can spot fake images.
Some of these images are clearly manipulated, like this image of a girl and a puppy riding an alligator. Did this really happen? No, it's just too unlikely to be true. So here's the first tip. Think to yourself, does this even make sense? If it seems too unreal or dramatic, then it could be AI. So that one was obvious. But when these images of a girl with her puppy during Hurricane Helene were shared to X, a lot of people believed them to be real photos. Our second tip is this. Whenever you have more than one image, compare them to see if there are any differences. And here there are. So first off, she's wearing two different color shirts. This one is black, and this one is blue. Secondly, look at the boat that she's sitting in. Over here, it is a gray boat, but here, it's green. And even the dog looks the same at first glance, but when you compare their features, you'll notice that this dog has a darker snout than this one does. Now let's zoom in. Whenever you have just one image, look closely at the faces for errors made by AI. The girl's teeth appear jagged and distorted, and she has this really exaggerated expression. Plus, her skin has that smooth airbrush look. Inaccuracies like these are common in images made by AI. Now, it may seem like a lot of work to spot and try to look at clues in an image to determine if it's authentic, but that's why it's also important to get your information from a reliable source. A final example is this image posted to Facebook. At first glance, it looks super realistic. A man is rescuing his dog, but take a second and pause. Does anything here stand out as unreal? Well, first off, this is the roof of a house, meaning this man would be extremely tall if his feet are on the ground. And this reflection also seems a bit off because there's no sign of the man or the dog in the reflection. And remember to check the faces and the hands. When we zoom in over here, we can see that he actually has an extra finger on the side of his hand. Now, there is a lot of fear about the impact of AI and what it could do to our understanding of news events, but we've got you covered. So here are some of the key tips for spotting AI. First, think twice about images that just seem too dramatic. Next, look for inconsistencies in details across similar images. Check the hands and the faces, compare what you see to known references, and also check official sources for the latest information. And lastly, make sure to follow CBS News Confirm for more tips.
We're going to take a quick break. More news ahead. You're streaming CBS News 24/7.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy.
And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
I'm open to the idea of being a human being.
innovative, and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Haitians are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's gonna be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm gonna remember that the rest of my life. They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Finally tonight, it is my final night at the Daily Report. 2 years ago, when we launched Prime Time, the predecessor to this show, our goal was to deliver the news in a way that treated your attention like the precious thing that it is. Not to poke at you or agitate you in order to lure you into watching or leave you guessing to keep you holding on. We promised to say that the news was only breaking when it happened during the show or just before it. Not scream breaking news for events that happened back in the Ford administration. We sought to tell you not just what happened, but to try to understand why it was happening. If the news was alarming, we hoped you understood it a little bit better after your time with us. We are heartened that so many wrote in to say that that's what you felt, and we are heartened that CBS News let us tell the news that way. It's why we got into the business in the first place. The team that puts on this show does so much hard work to make it happen, all behind the scenes. Around me right now is a ballet of colleagues who keep us to time, follow my strange speaking style on the teleprompter, keep me in frame, fix the mic, and read my occult hand signals when I'm trying to noiselessly communicate. Also makeup, because my forehead can get shiny enough to signal ships at sea. The booking team hunts for the great experts we have every night, like tonight's, even though we ask for very difficult kinds of guests to find. The small and mighty staff of producers has to become experts at complicated questions very quickly when facts are changing. And they all have to put up with me, the edits, the emails, the repetition. Not so easy working with someone who is perfect all the time. Vice President Harris continues to hopscotch. Hopscotch is not a word in American language. Vice President Harris continues to hopscotch. It's like, what the hell? Where did that word come from? The cleanup from Hurricane Helene, preparing for Hurricane... So, to all of my colleagues, thank you for working so hard to get it right. Thank you for the honor of allowing me to associate my name with your work. Proof of how strong a show the Daily Report team has created overcame me last night when I was in the newsroom doing something else and watching the show. I was jealous that I wasn't anchoring. Of course, I'm not going very far. Even when I join the evening news team, I'll be in this actual studio for a little while. I'll also be on CBS News 24/7 again. More about that to come. And the Daily Report show that I describe being jealous of will be here for all of you viewers with the same team and the same anchor from that show last night, Lindsay Reiser, who is here to take us out. Over to you, Lindsay.
I don't know whether to laugh or cry. That is your gift of the word, John. You just leave such incredible shoes to fill. I don't really know what to say. I'm speechless for once. But I think I do have to mention, first of all, I'm so grateful for you being so generous with this show. Hopefully we can build on the foundation that you have laid. But I can tell you right now, there is not a dry eye in that control room. There are probably, if we had a control room cam, there would be 10 sets of very tearful eyes. There are. I know that for a fact, and that speaks to how you treat people and how kind you are and how beloved you are.
Well, thank you. That's very sweet. They could also be tears of joy.
I doubt it.
Anyway, thank you so much, Lindsay. I guess I'll do it one last time. Here's a look at some of the stories we're covering in our next hour. It's 3 weeks until Election Day, and both candidates are making their last-minute bids to voters, with millions already casting their ballots. We'll break down the very different approaches each side is taking. Plus, the U.S. tells Israel to improve the humanitarian situation in Gaza or risk potential restrictions on American aid. We'll have a report from the ground in the Middle East. And some residents are returning to their homes after Hurricane Milton devastated parts of Florida. A look at the damage and how Floridians are recovering. Here streaming, CBS News.
Okay, so let's just start at the beginning.
Well, let me start with this.
What is at stake here? What is the answer then?
Do you know why?
You want me to just keep going?
Is that a good thing or